Okay, awesome. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for hanging in there with us. It's been a wonderful, long, very educational weekend. And Stacey, especially thank you to you for this great summit that you put together. Just really excited to be a part of it. So we got to hear from some amazing, amazing women. And for today, I wanted to share with you all what I've been doing, which is luxury short-term rental. So my name is Rachel Gainsbrugh. I'm a lifestyle investor, which essentially means I am basically investing and living intentionally. I want to live my life intentionally with the cash flow I earn through investments. So I still do work a W-2. My goal primarily with the W-2 is just kind of utilizing and leveraging that income and that stability to acquire favorable lending options, but looking forward to when we can kick that W-2 to the curb. And a little bit more about me. I'm married. I've been married to my sweetheart, Jesse, for 15 years, have two boys, and we started our investing journey, I would say really with a debt-free journey. We had a gazillion student loans. And so we spent years grinding and paying that off. And as soon as we completed that, we felt as though we were a little bit behind in investing in our future and our savings. So we started to look around, and what I found was that out of all of the investment strategies, real estate was one that really resonated with us because, real property was something we could understand. It was something that we could leverage and put our hands on. We could touch the property, as opposed to all that's out there right now, which is very sexy and interesting, cryptocurrency and all of that. Wasn't really able to wrap our minds around that. So real estate was very appealing to us. However, when we really looked at our path to financial freedom, we found that short-term rentals really would accelerate our path to financial freedom. So since we're both busy parents and we work, we do not necessarily have a great amount of time to source properties, do extensive fix and flips, nor do we have the the skill set, so our skill set is better serves us really in our day-to-day careers. And so finding properties that were in decent condition, that needed a little bit of lipstick, and in great neighborhoods was really the strategy that we found to be most favorable for us. And so what that means is that we do not necessarily purchase, or we do not often acquire 10, 20 properties within a year. So it's kind of a slower go at it. And our goal is really to acquire and control the least amount of properties for maximum cash flow. So this is me on the edge there with my periodic table dress. So I'm very nerdy. I'm very analytical, scientific minded. And so I had to kind of get out of that consumer versus investor mindset, So my parents and my husband's parents, all our friends always say, never buy a home that needs plumbing, or never buy a home that needs electrical. And honestly, that was a big aha moment to me when I continued to research real estate, consumed a lot of books, podcasts, and so on and so forth. I quickly realized that everything is figure outable, so to speak. And so what that means is when I actually found this particular book, the book on rental property investing, and you see this little table here that outlines the different expenditures that would come into place for replacement of these major issues. So in this book, and not that it's all accurate, but the fact that they wrote down the issue and the replacement cost in numbers, the lifespan of the actual repair, to me, that spoke volumes. So that means you can really quantify it and figure it out. And as a lay consumer and a non-investor, that book had so much impact on me. So for instance, a roof, it was a $5,000 replacement cost. And of course, it's gonna depend on the size, location, and so on and so forth. So that was a really big aha moment to me. And here's AirDNA. AirDNA is the data aggregation platform. They aggregate data for Airbnb. It's part of Airbnb. And the data that I was reviewing in reference to determining whether long-term rental, single-family homes versus short-term rental and so on and so forth is going to be more favorable. I would look at information such as the trends reports. I would compare that to long-term rentals. And so this is the latest and greatest from AirDNA back in, I think, no, this was published in December. And so a lot of people ask, so, oh my goodness, how are your Airbnbs doing right now? You know, a lot of homeowners went through the ringer with Airbnb over the last year or so due to COVID. However, you know, thankfully, there are opportunities to pivot. There are opportunities to extend stays. So instead of very short-term stays, midterm to longer term stays really won, I think, in 2020. So for example, typically we would say the smaller the Airbnb, the better. According to this report that came out, it says that the larger single family units perform the best. And so, case in point, I had a nurse who reached out to me who was traveling for work, and her son was out from school. He was doing school virtually, and not only did she want to find a place for her, she wanted to find a place also for her son and a pet. And so, the larger the units, the better in terms of performance. Another demand that we noticed on the report was there was an increase in demand for short-term rentals in rural locations. And so that's a bit new. People seem to want to be out, you know, out off the beaten path. They wanted to be a little bit away from the big city, the urban areas due to COVID. And so prioritization was on cleanliness and additionally on social distancing and so on and so forth. And not surprisingly, and I'm sure you all are aware that short-term rentals significantly outperformed hotels. And so this really was an impressive report, and I have the link down at the bottom if you want to check it out for yourself. So data and having data-driven analysis of properties, I think is really, really key in order to get a short-term rental that is going to be profitable. And so as we continued on our journey, you know, I set some goals. I know we've had several speakers speak about goal setting. This is just a couple of snapshots of my journal, my goal setting for the next 5 years, and so on and so forth. So I do a digital journal. I try to avoid paper as much as possible. And now I just want to kind of jump in with you the 4 things or I look at, just the 4 basics when evaluating and selecting the location of my next Airbnb. So for instance, if you're just starting out, this is, I think, just such a great stepwise process. However, if you already are in the business and you have coined an area, you can continue on in that area. But if you're looking to expand into other areas, I think this would be a great process to take into consideration. So before we look at any location really in, you know, for short-term rentals, if that is your goal, we need to look at the regulations. So regulations come before numbers. Short-term rentals that are Airbnb friendly, those types of markets are the ones that we definitely want to take into consideration. And so there are articles out there about that. There are websites that discuss that. And I think that it's important to have a broad overview of those. However, when you start to hone in on a particular property within a particular county in a city, it's going to be important to reach out to the specific zoning office to get that regulatory information. And some of the general articles, I would say, in terms of the zoning and whether or not it's Airbnb friendly, they will place a city and say, okay, this city does not allow Airbnb, or this city does allow Airbnb. However, I found that it's not typically 100% of the city. There are pockets where it may or may not be allowed. So that's going to be really, really important to look at. You make sure you identify the zonings within that particular city. And also, I think it's actually a little smart strategy because that city may not have a significant amount of Airbnbs. And I think it would be smart for Airbnb investors to take advantage of that limitation when they're purchasing a property, to look within the zones where it is allowable. And that would reduce the competition as well. Okay, so to get into the numbers a little bit, the next thing we want to look at is profitability at, ROI. And so I would say ROI is a very loose term. We won't know exactly the return on your investment after you purchase a property, primarily because you would need to have rented it and sold it, and to really get a good picture of that whole return. So in the Airbnb world, we typically look at cash on cash return. We also look at CapEx or cap rates as well. And so at a glance, if you just see a property and you're interested in identifying whether or not it would make a good short-term rental, at a glance, I would suggest just making sure it would make a good rental, long-term rental to start. And then we can deep dive into the short-term rental. And so the 1% rule is where the monthly market rent is 1% of the purchase price, is what I typically look at a glance. And then I can do a little bit more deep diving. So next, seasonality is a big deal. I know there has been shifts in seasonality. So some areas that were, high occupancy rate during certain months because of COVID, that has shifted. Some folks have returned to those favored or loved properties at unexpected times during the year because they can quarantine there. So for me, I prefer a property, and I found that the most profitable properties are year-round properties and not a significant amount of seasonality. So if you can only rent your rental 25% of the year, I wouldn't expect that you would see a great cash on cash return or return on your investment. So the profitability would be low. And I would highly recommend that you look for a place that can give you some kind of year-round rental opportunities. And there are going to be caveats for that. For instance, if it's in a highly vacationed area, such as Florida, where there are hurricanes, those types of places, it would definitely impact it. And the last thing I do when I identify a property, I analyze the property. I can do a quick check on Airbnb's Rentalizer, or I can do just to get an idea of how much is the average annual rate that I should expect, as well as the average occupancy rate. So my average occupancy rate that I prefer is over 65% occupancy. And the annual rent that I would receive, it varies based on the purchase price of the property. And so down here is an example of a property that I looked at. And so this property has the location or the neighborhood has a median property price of a little bit under 200K. The Airbnb rental income was $1,551 per month. The Airbnb cash on cash return was 4.25%. The cap rate was the same, 4.24, and the occupancy rate was 23%. And so this property for me would be a non-starter. A couple of things. The cash on cash return that I like for Airbnbs, honestly, is above 15%, but I'll look at anything over 10%. And the occupancy rate is 23%. I would prefer 65%. I'm okay with a 50% because occupancy rate is also driven by the host or the homeowner. So there are some things you can do in marketing to drive up that occupancy rate. However, at 23%, that occupancy rate is a little bit, would be a little bit difficult to navigate. So I want to jump into a spreadsheet to do a quick activity with everyone, but I can pause right now to ask if there are any questions. That's okay, Stacy?
If you have any questions, put it into the chat. Any questions? I don't see any questions yet. I think they're just listening.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Well, give them a second. But I think they should be. I think everybody's good. Keep going.
Alrighty. So I have a quick activity I'd like to you all to participate in. So I have a question. I'd like you to pick a dream city in the US you'd like to visit, and go to Minty.com and enter that in. You're going to use the code. Give it a try if you're on a computer. Okay. We have New York City. Anyone else? Oh, New York. Got Chicago, Hawaii. Nice. Awesome. So we have Cape Cod, San Francisco, the Keys, New York, Vermont, Chicago, Hawaii. So as simple as that was, that's really the Virgin Islands, Colorado. We're getting some more. Martha's Vineyard. I love it. Nice. Scottsdale. That's a good one. Scottsdale, I believe they're on the top 10 for places to have an Airbnb. So that's awesome. All right, thank you guys for participating. So I do have a spreadsheet activity I'd like to share with you, pretty much how I approached locating my Airbnb and locating a city that would make a good Airbnb. So I'm gonna have my little worksheet. Can you guys see the Excel spreadsheet?
No, we can't.
Okay.
Okay, we see Menti. So just close. Like you probably have to unshare and then share again because switching with Zoom sometimes sucks. There you go.
Okay. Can you see it now?
Okay, yeah, something's happening. Let me see. Something's happening.
Yay!
For some reason, we can't see it. It's like black. I'm not sure what's going on.
Huh. Okay, let me stop again and I'll try again.
Try it again. Yeah, for some reason, it's like black. I'm not sure.
Huh. Okay.
It's a spreadsheet.
Yeah, it's an Excel spreadsheet. Let me see if it'll just let me share the spreadsheet and not the entire screen. We're gonna get it together. All right, let's try that.
Or maybe, is it on a different, hang on now. Let me see, hang on. You might be on a different, hang on, let me look.
Okay.
You have two things up. Maybe it's on the other one.
Well, one is just my phone, and I've just been using my monitor the whole time.
Okay, yeah, no, your phone's not doing it. Yeah, for some reason it's not. It says double click to enter full screen mode. No, Rachel has started screen sharing, but we don't see anything. Unless, is somebody else seeing it and I'm not seeing it? Because I'm not seeing it.
Is anyone else seeing it?
No, nobody's seeing it.
Okay.
Try it again. I'm not sure.
Okay. Let's try it one more time. And if not, I'll just talk through it.
No, it's just black. Oh yeah, there it goes. Now it's working.
Okay.
Okay, now we can see.
Weird. Okay, so it took like 3 tries for some reason. All right. So just like you all place some names of cities that you're interested in. That's what I did as well, similarly. So I picked my personal 3 choices of cities, and I did this quite systematically. And I wanted ultimately to have a list of maybe 10 cities that I wanted to identify for Airbnb. So my 3 personal cities were Santa Rosa Beach, and I did go out of country a bit. I said, oh, okay, it would be a dream to go to Paris and Bora Bora. At one point I had Hawaii on there as well. And so those were my 3 personal choice cities. And so after selecting those 3 cities, what I did next was identify cities based on trends. So for instance, there are articles out there, there are blogs that Airbnb publishes, as well as other short-term rental organizations. And they publish articles based on trends. And I shared a little bit of the trends earlier in terms of what we expect to see in 2021 based on what types of accommodations were the winners, so to speak. And so definitely take a look at those articles and identify 3 additional cities from those articles. So for instance, occupancy rate. I look for, of course, occupancy rate greater than 65%. And let's see, I have a trend article here. Okay, and so AirDNA, again, is the data aggregate, data mining body of Airbnb, and it provides you the best places to invest in vacation rentals in 2020 and 2021. And so it kind of gives you some great definitions, and then it provides you some cities and places to consider. So within these articles, I believe they use, I forget which software, but within the articles, what's great is that the filters are your friends. So if you just want to go alphabetical order, state to state. And so Cherry Log and Cleveland, Georgia were the top 2 within this up and coming markets. So that's updated information, guys. So Cherry Log and Cleveland, Georgia, up and coming markets. In Cherry Log, there are 97 active properties, and Cleveland 85. Annual revenue potential is 42,000 or so, 41,000 and 36,000. Revenue growth expected, rental demand, investability, and the investor score. So you can kind of use the filters based on the header to identify the annual revenue potential, city and state, and so on and so forth. And so this section is the up and coming. This next section is the best places to buy for the mid-sized market. And again, filters are your friends. You can use the filters to identify some cities, as well as the revenue. So if you wanted to go, let's go high, from high to low. Captiva, Florida. is also an option. And then these are the larger markets. So these have the greatest amount of properties and best places to own within the large market. So you have 2,000, 6,000 in Las Vegas, Nevada. So the next step, I got my handy dandy spreadsheet and I picked 3 additional properties and placed them on to this spreadsheet. And this was a couple years back, so the information is not current. And then another step 3, as I continue to zoom in to different cities, I used another resource called Mashvisor. And Mashvisor is another tool similar to airdna.co. And so, for instance, the 50 best cities for Airbnb rental income in 2020. And this is another type of log. It's going to list the cities, and based on what your purchasing power is, you can identify which ones would make the most sense for you. So again, 900K, which is astronomical, and so on and so forth. So if we were to go down to properties within 100 to 200,000, the number 1 properties are in Orangeburg, South Carolina. The monthly rental income estimate is $2,940, and the property median property price is a little under 200K. And so these are some examples of blogs that I utilize to identify a few more cities. And so I just kind of placed them on my list as well. And then I looked at some just general trend articles. So Google search, you can utilize Airbnb friendly cities or Airbnb best Airbnb cities in Google and identify some reputable articles. And I added these 3 cities just out of the blue. And so once I have my list of cities to identify, the next step is to find out what the average daily rate is for these cities. And so I utilize primarily airdna.co to get the average daily rate. And let's get that. Okay. So for Atlanta, for instance, you can see here that the average daily rate for property in Atlanta, and again, this is broad strokes. Each neighborhood within Atlanta is going to be different. The average daily rate was $144 per night, and the average occupancy rate was 55%, which is pretty good. And again, as I mentioned, anything above 50% is manageable because the driver of that occupancy rate is going to be the host or the homeowner. Okay, so I took my time, I did this exercise, looked at the average daily rate for each of these properties, or for each of these cities rather. And then my next step was to go to Zillow Home Estimation, just to get a general idea. Again, this is generalities. So I wanted to see the average home price for that city. And so again, broad strokes. We all know that market conditions have changed. Homes are flying off the market, and it is definitely a seller's market at this time. So all of this information is going to be very specific to the property. So I filled this out with the home prices and Airbnb regulations. So that's going to be really important as you continue to hone in, if you do find that area that you're interested in, to understand what the home price, what the regulations will be. My apologies. I was getting a message. I think we're getting some questions, Stacy.
want to do questions now or during at the end?
Okay, let me finish this spreadsheet and then I can do
I think that's best.
Okay. And then again, so filters are your friends with this sheet as well that I created. So I would go from, let's see, let's do descending. So the property that had the best ROI, and it's just a quick and dirty formula that I utilized. I think that's more of a cap rate formula, again, broad strokes. And so the property in Cleveland properties in Cleveland seems to be the best city to have an Airbnb based on this document here. However, these numbers are subject to change, of course. And in addition, there are a lot of factors. I know in Ohio, there are some taxes, state taxes or property taxes that are extremely high. So that information would need to be calculated as well. So lots and lots of caveats with this. However, if you're just starting, I received a question from someone who's asking for coaching, like, where do I even start? I just thought this would be beneficial to go through and to give you an idea of how to start. However, if you have an actual property that you are looking at and you want to know if it does, whether or not it makes a good Airbnb, I do have a link here to Airbnb's Rentalizer, and it's kind of like the long-term rental rentometer. And I'm going to put in a specific address in Miami. Okay, so this is a free tool, Rentalizer. They will ask you for an email to log in. However, this portion of it is free. If you want to do a deeper dive, it is going to be a paid subscription. When you do have a property in mind, and when you're starting off with Airbnb, I do recommend that you do pay for some of the subscription for some of these data mining tools, just to get a gauge on what performance the properties are having within the area. So it's kind of a business investment because it's going to be really important. So this specific property, if you have an address, you want to know whether you found the property on the MLS or from direct marketing, you want to know or have a gauge on what the property would bring in every annually. This particular property says it'll bring in about $44,921 annually, and average daily rate is $227, and it has a 54% occupancy rate. And I would suggest running this number against Mashvisor, and there are some other steps as well that I take just to double check and triple check, but this is really the first step and the first thing I take into consideration when checking on whether or not a property would make a good short-term rental. Okay, so this tool, Rentalizer, is specifically when you have the address of a property that you want to check out real quick. All right, I can pause now for questions, Stacey, before we move on to the next portion.
Okay. Yeah, we do have a couple of questions. Okay. Let's start from the beginning here. How can you find these reports? I guess you did some reports.
Yeah, so the reports, I can share the link with Stacey. If Stacey, you want to put it on REI USA, as far as the
post them out in the private Facebook group? Either post them out in the private Facebook group, or can you post them in the chat?
I can, yeah. And you can search for them. If you search for terms 2020 Airbnb trends, you would find that report. But be sure that it's a reputable site like airdna.co. That's going to be your most reputable in terms of Airbnb data. So they scrubbed the data and provided to us.
Okay, so yeah, airdna.co, Mash Pfizer, and then are you buying your B&Bs or doing arbitrage?
Okay, so that is a great question. Currently, I'm buying my B&Bs. I did have one arbitrage that was out of state. I'm still interested in grabbing a few arbitrage that are locally. So far, primarily, I'm purchasing my B&Bs.
Are you doing mortgages in your personal name or your LLC?
Mortgages are in our personal name. And so I would say that's the biggest reason why it's a bit slow going and acquiring multiple. So we're up to 4 now. It's slow in acquiring multiple, because there are huge down payments when you're purchasing in your name. The mortgage lenders that I've worked with, they have not been very open to transitioning to LLC. I really haven't found too many. And with the current rates that are out there, there are just some great rates. I'm grateful I haven't had to dabble too much into hard money where the rates are much higher. So it's just been conventional mortgages, FHA, if we're going to be living in the property, and house hacking and that kind of thing.
Yeah, there's some great rates out there. So if you have a W-2 job or if somebody in your family does, take advantage of those is what we're saying right now. You can always change your name. You can always change the owner later if you need to.
Yes,
Okay,
that's
not
the
sure
plan.
if you stated this, but do you only market on Airbnb?
That's a great question. And so when I started out, as I mentioned earlier, I have like the analysis. I overanalyze. Sometimes I have analysis paralysis, but what I didn't want to do is to kind of pigeonhole myself. And so with that being said, as soon as we launched, I launched on multiple platforms. And I got to tell you, VRBO is actually the platform that books us the most. So we're on Airbnb, we're on VRBO, we're on Transplant Housing. Let me see, Furnished Finder, we're on Set Scouter, and let's see who else we're on. Okay, In Focus, Copaco. And so I would say VRBO is our number one. CHBO also. So corporate housing by owner is another one. Corporate housing by owner. Oh, I don't know what corporate shopping is. Corporate housing by owner has been really important in terms of during the COVID times. When when I guess the states started to shut down, we had a family that was just sold their home, and they were going to go overseas to live their best dream life ever. And unfortunately, because of COVID, they were not able to relocate. And so they didn't have a home, and they needed to stay in the US. They couldn't go overseas. And so they booked us for, I would say, 4 months. Then we had a family from Korea that couldn't go back home. They booked us for another 3 months, and so on and so forth. So corporate housing by owner is great. And I believe Jen, she spoke to the insurance companies. So we've had nothing but wonderful experiences with the insurance companies. I got to tell you, but of course you can learn from everyone. So our property was on corporate housing, and they reached out to us. And although the property that was listed there was booked, we had another property we're getting ready to launch. Well, the insurance company had a family, a teacher within the same community whose house had burnt down, and there were no other properties in the area that were available. So they would have to drive probably 45 minutes away. The teacher teaches in the county, his kids are in the county, wife works in the county. And so sight unseen, we went ahead and allowed them to rent from us. And I think the corporate rental insurance role is very, very profitable. We're getting about 3 times market rent monthly. And so definitely would consider insurance, corporate rentals with the insurance adjusters. And as long as, especially, it's booked by the insurance company. And I believe Jen was saying that it was booked by the client that was the burn assailant. I think they burnt down the house. So that was that's a situation. Definitely credit. I did a background check, although, the insurance was booking, and I did all of that. And so it's been a really wonderful experience. And we hope to get into that a little bit more. But definitely diversification, Airbnb, VRBO, booking.com is also another avenue. And also direct booking is what's being encouraged right now. So direct booking is for sure going to be the wave of the future and very important.
Okay. Also, especially I think for luxury.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When you're not sure you stated this. Oh, we already did that one. Are these sites good to analyze 30, 60, or 90-day rentals?
Well, that's a good question. So as far as the rentalizer, I would not say necessarily no. If you're looking for let's see, well, 30, 60, 90 days, yeah, it's possible. Okay, so typically Airbnb, we know that they're the 1 and 2 day, short-term stays. There has been a change in trajectory for sure. So there is a request for 30, 90, and extended stay. Even while the guest is in the house, it's day 7, they'll reach out and they say, hey, can we stay another couple of weeks because of that flexibility? They may be a remote worker, their kids are going to school remote, there's been changes in their town, and so they want to stay longer. So there has been a change. So I would say Airbnb and AirDNA.co, they're working expeditiously. I see reports coming out all the time to kind of get up to date on giving us more and more data for that longer or quote unquote mid-term stay clientele.
So if somebody wants to stay in a house for that long, what's the best place to go? Like for me, like I'm going and traveling and I'm like, where Airbnb seems so expensive for like 30 days or 60 days. It's like $10,000 sometimes.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
that like how they all are? It just seems so ridiculously expensive.
Here's what I would suggest. Let me think. Furnish Finder. Go to Furnish Finder, Stacey.
Okay, that's where I need to go. Okay.
Yeah, because these are typically nurses, and they come to town to work for 30, 60, or 90 days. And they're not going to be paying $10,000 when they're getting paid maybe $10,000 or $8,000 or $6,000.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
All right,
So
that's a good tip. I like it.
Yeah, use that tip, but be mindful. It's not going to be, you may not have all of the bells and whistles, but it's going to be more affordable and you'll be in a town that you want to be in.
Okay, cool. Out of these estimated revenues, what's the average expense rate for property management, turnovers, repairs, etc.?
Okay. All right, so that's a great question. And that's definitely something that you need to take into consideration. I 100% self-manage all of my properties. I believe in having a team. I have a team of handymen, a team of a cleaning team, and a team of plumbers. I have several. So if the first one doesn't work out, I have a second and a third option, because unlike long-term rentals, if something goes down in your property as a short-term rental, that needs to be addressed stat. It's not, oh, we'll get somebody tomorrow. Say they're staying there for just 7 days. If 2 or 3 of those 7 days are ruined, there goes your 5 out of 5 review. So your property is going to be, well maintained. The property is going to be just very, very comfortable for your client. And so that's going to be huge. So I use different resources in order to source and find these, I guess, property helpers. And similar to what Stacy does with putting out ads, just cold call type of ads on Craigslist, or finding someone on Thumbtack, and just having my options out there, letting them know what I'm doing, and just having that information and making that introduction. That's going to be huge. Your cleaning team will make or break your business. If they do not clean well, that's it. No one wants to come in and pay all this money for an Airbnb and they're walking on crumbs and it wasn't vacuumed and something's dirty. I mean, down to even the trash can, if they lift the bag and the trash can is dirty, I mean, that's cringe, right? So it's really, really important to have that team. And if there's always an unforeseen circumstance, and that's why I believe in three. Okay, the electrician can't come, number two, number three, and I keep until that's resolved. And so what's great about the rentals, and I hate that they're priced so high, but the higher you price them, especially in a nice area, the less complaints you get. And so if there's something going on and they see that there's an effort, there's movement, someone's coming and they're trying to figure it out to fix it, I think you'll be fine.
Okay. Are you aware of AirDNA is using historical data from the previous year, or is it based on the Airbnb pricing algorithm, which we've heard of is not reliable?
Yeah, so it's a combination of things. So AirDNA uses quite a bit of historical data. And I believe in terms of projections of occupancy rates, they use historical data, they use tourism data from the tourism board to identify what's going to be up and coming in terms of businesses that are going to be opening in the area or events and things like that. So they're using quite a few different I would say data points in order to provide us that information. Yes, I agree. The historical data, you can't rely on it 100%. For instance, I believe there was like, let's see, the Super Bowl when it was in Atlanta, I think it was some homes were being rented for like $1,000 a night. Well, if that data is still sitting out there, that's definitely going to skew what your expected rental is going to be. So you're going to have to take that with a grain of salt for sure. Let me think. Additionally, in addition to AirDNA, I use Mashvisor, and when I'm getting really serious about a property, I use a whole other method as well. So this data is great for acquisitions, like preliminary acquisitions. But if I'm ready to start putting some money, earnest funds or something like that, I deep dive. I go into the Airbnb portal as though I am a consumer. Like I'm going to rent out an Airbnb, and I look at a few things. I look at others who are renting, the average that they're renting for. I look at their reviews. I look at their occupancy. I look at their average daily rate, and so on and so forth. So I really do some of that research. AirDNA, I will say the paid subscription has a new comparison program that just launched last week. I played with it some. It seems really, really interesting. And it is taking into consideration actual revenue that was paid out, which is great. But there's always a caveat, right? So AirDNA is wonderful, Mashvisor is wonderful. However, when you go into these really high-end vacation areas, these homeowners tend to not use Airbnb. Some of them are older, they're affluent, they think Airbnb is, just this party website. So they don't post on there. They use property managers. They use direct bookings. They have their own links. Say the property's called Sunnyside. It's going to be www.sunnyside.com. And they've been managing it for 20, 30 years that way. And so they may not even be on Airbnb. So that's some data that is lost within the Airbnb and the VRBO world. However, there is a whole other platform called Key Data. Key Data is a platform. It's very robust and is very expensive. So I've been making friends, lots of friends, to see if they can provide me bits and pieces of data for certain properties. But it's not going to be easy to access if you're not like a property manager for like 20 properties. In this beach resort area. So key data is going to be key for those like real vacation areas where there are resorts and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I noticed that when I was down in Florida and I was trying to find a place to stay. Like, I mean, most of them you have to contact the property management company. And
Yeah.
if it's not property management, it's like crappy.
Yeah.
Or expensive, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a couple more questions. Do all these sites sync together or do you have to do all this double booking? The ones that you showed.
Like double research, you mean?
Yeah, I guess double research.
Okay. Yeah, no, they don't sync. So you will see some overlap, but they do not sync.
Okay. Do you manage these or use a property management company? You already said you manage them.
Manage. Mm-hmm.
Do you how does direct booking work when you have your place listed on other platforms?
So it's going to be, I would say, primarily from your marketing strategy. Like, for instance, we have a property, we name all our properties. So Parkwoods, no one's going to know to look at parkwoods.co or whatever, or no one's going to know to look at All Tied Up, which is another property on the beach. So it's going to be primarily from your repeat guests for the most part. Yeah. So repeat guests, you can, after they leave, you can send them, hey, a little, postcard, love to have had you. Stay with us whenever you're coming back our way. Here's my, direct booking site. You can get a little discount, 5%, 10% or something like that. Yeah.
Okay. Would you do Airbnb around the military?
That's a good question. I've never thought of that before. So I would need to know the client avatar. So are these family members that visit the military personnel? How often do they stay? And those are the types of questions that I would ask. Personally, I would not do long-term rentals. That's just that's not my business, process. So I don't do long-term rentals. So I would probably try to figure out a way to do some kind of a midterm rental, maybe month to month or 3 months to 3 months, something like that. But with the long-term rentals, they're great, but they do both have their pros and cons, right? Short-term rentals, you got to pay to play. I get paid before you even show up. I'm not evicting nobody. I work full time already. I don't want to be at the courthouse, but it is hands-on. It is not passive, at least not yet. So we do have systems we're building in order to get it to the passive realm. But yeah.
Okay, what about how do you handle angry neighbors?
Oh, that's a really good question. So did I mention, I didn't mention it a little bit earlier, but on one of the slides, I mentioned regulations before numbers, right? So part of the regulation is HOA. Number one, it's an absolute no to HOAs if I'm in suburbia. Okay. I do not do HOAs in the suburban areas. I will only do an HOA in a high vacation area, because with the HOA comes with a mega pool with a slide, and it is a rental vacation area. So I will only do an HOA within a rental vacation area. Okay. So part of that, all of that is just understanding your regulations. There are a lot of things that come into play. So in Georgia and Florida, there are regulatory boards for what you can and cannot do within your property, and how to handle issues and advocacy in situations that may or may not come up. So This is something they cover all the time, and it is great to kind of be plugged in with REI USA. And Rich Monroe does a good session on it, where if you have angry neighbors, it's going to be addressing what is the issue. You know, if they're just angry to be angry, well, there's not much you can do about that, right? But if there's a valid reason that they're angry, if there's a party, if people are loud, you know, there are going to be things that you put in place to mitigate that beforehand and preemptively. Transparency is key when you're opening up an Airbnb. You know, let your neighbors know. And there's a whole process, and Rich has a great smooth way of you know, just introducing yourself. Hey, we see this house was, you know, vacant, we went ahead and purchased it, and we're going to be renting it as a corporate rental to those who are traveling, business people, or just kind of put it together. But if it ends up being a party, then that's something that you definitely want to mitigate beforehand. So there are tools such as Noise Aware that identifies when there's a increased number of people entering the property. You will get dinged on your phone like, okay, you know, it was booked for 7 people, and now based on the amount of cell phones and amount of, you know, activity there, it appears that there are, you know, 15 people there. So already you have an opportunity to let them know. The key code, if, you know, they're out of line in terms of the house rules, as soon as they leave, if they're going to head out and come back in, you can have that key code changed and locked. Security, there's a gentleman in Marietta who does security for Airbnb. I've got him on speed dial, so he'll come and help evict for you, and so on and so forth. And things happen, and when it happens, it's happened to us once. You know, I go neighbor to neighbor, I am so sorry that this happened. A bottle of wine, so sorry. And so those are kind of the things you do to mitigate it. I mean, you know, the rules are there are no parties. And if someone wants to be silly and break the rules, there's not really a great way to prevent them from doing it. But once, you know, they start to head in that direction, you can kind of intervene before it's too late. You know, and so as the neighbors are calling me, I'm like, I see them, I'm coming, because we have cameras on the that kind of thing. So yeah, those were some of the hairier situations.
She was asking syncing like from the different sites like Airbnb and
Oh yeah.
VRBO. How does that work?
Sure. There are channel managers that help with syncing. One is named Your Porter, which I've used. It's pretty good. They sync Airbnb, VRBO, and as well as Furnish Finder, I believe, which is great. Additionally, there are others such as Lodgify and Guesty that are also help with the syncing of all of the properties, so that if someone's booking on Airbnb or if someone's booking on VRBO, they will not, you know, book simultaneously, and you have to cancel one of them. Mm-hmm. And for other platforms like Corporate Housing by Owner, there's not an instant book function. So they have to have a conversation with you before booking, so you don't have to worry about syncing that one in particular. And corporate housing is usually 30 plus days anyway.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Okay, good. Let's see. Any other final questions? We had one about avatars. What's a real estate investing avatar? But honestly, I think that really depends on which industry you're going in. Every single industry is a completely different avatar. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, as far as a client coming to rent from us, or book a short-term rental.
I mean, well, I guess for you, that's what your avatar would be.
Yeah. So our clientele, I mean, if the question is in reference to the clientele, we have so many different clients. Like we'll have a family that's coming over to like this weekend, the Sundance Festival, and they needed to be at our property for a few days and away from everything because they were hosting part of the Sundance Festival virtually. Okay. And we have clients who are coming back to visit family in our area. So most of our properties are in Peachtree City, Georgia. So older folks, older family live in the area. So, and they want a bigger home so everyone can gather together. We have an 80-year-old birthday party. We have funerals. We have nurses, we have doctors, medical professionals, we have financiers from Switzerland, we have guys from Canada golfing, we have 4 golf courses within the area. And so it could be anything really.
Yeah, I think honestly, Avatar, I guess for her, yeah, for Rachel is completely different from me or probably from anybody else. So yeah, so that's kind of how it works. Okay, so I guess that's it for all the questions. What does anybody have while we're this is our last session, so we're done. We survived, right? So thank you, Rachel, for hanging out with us. I had a blast. I mean, I got really so much out of it. So I really appreciate you guys hanging on to the end.